Have you ever had a moment where someone says something so small, but it echoes in your chest for days? That happened to me recently. It wasn't even critical, it was honest. Why do pretty girls always have to hate each other? That line, that one ending line, it hit me like a brick. And I was left wondering, do I really hate Shadowheart? Welcome to the Forgotten Realms, the home of Dungeons & Dragons and Baldur's Gate 3. Today's video essay is about, well, a question that spawned from a less than favorable comment. Do I really hate Shadowheart? And the answer is complicated. If you've been around this channel for a while, you've probably heard the running joke. I hate Shadowheart. It's something I've said in passing, teased in edits, or played up for laughs. But recently, someone left a comment that made me stop and really think. And while we'll read that comment a little later on, it got me asking questions that I wasn't really ready for. And before we push forward, we're gonna need a trigger warning. If you're someone who thinks people can never change and that they're always going to be the person that they were 10 years ago because you're drowning in the toxic side of, quote, cancel culture, end quote, well, then you're really gonna hate this one, babe. Because although I am a loud and proud, outwardly spoken liberal woman, I don't hold the belief that people can't change. I don't dig through years of past content on people to find some fault. I welcome people with open arms when they're ready to change and become open-minded, diverse, and inclusive. And spoiler alert, I grew up in a fundy Christian conservative family. That gave me lifetimes of religious and emotional trauma that stole my childhood from me. So I know firsthand what it's like to have to grow, change, and to escape the wrong side of culture. But for a real trigger warning, this essay contains personal stories of religious trauma, internalized misogyny, and some heavy emotional introspection. If you enjoy honest character deep dives, lore, and game essays with a personal edge, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel more than you know. Now, grab your cozy drink, settle into your favorite chair, and get comfortable, because I'm about to go a little deep.
I just realized that there are 2 chapters that for some reason recorded with absolutely no audio. So I'm going to be re-recording them, and those chapters are going to have slightly different audio quality. I apologize in advance. So here it is, the comment that stopped me in my tracks. I've blacked out the names because I'm not here to call anyone out. I'm not mad. Honestly, I'm grateful, in retrospect. I wanted to get into this channel so badly, but the Shadowheart hate makes me so sad. Her story really connected to me due to her experience with religious trauma and brainwashing. Her being able to still be herself after getting so much of her past erased and physical abuse helped me realize I'll be myself no matter how much others have influenced me. Why do pretty girls always have to hate each other? Now, on paper, this isn't a mean comment. They didn't call me names, they didn't accuse me of anything awful, but it still hit me. Not because it was a kind critique, but because what they said was true. So I responded as honestly as I could in the moment. I'm glad you feel that way. For one, it's just a running joke. I don't actually hate Shadowheart. For second, I do find her annoying though. But that's because I grew up Pentecostal, and her, for 90% of the game, reminds me of my religious family who are still deep in their cult. And that's just too triggering for me personally. It started as a joke because she's my husband's favorite, and I said she was annoying. It just kind of snowballed from there. If I really hated her, I'd 100% be making video essays against her instead of picking fun at her, like I did with Mistra, who I do hate, because she abuses her power to sleep with her charges, so it's a valid hate. But if it's coming off as me disliking her solely because she's pretty, that's not my intention. I'm bi, and white-haired her is totally my type, so it's good feedback to know it's coming off differently than intended. But even having shared my truth, I couldn't stop thinking about it. For days, really. It made me think about how often I've leaned into the idea of hating Shadowheart. How often I've made her the butt of jokes, or rolled my eyes at her cutscenes, or brushed her off because she's not my character. But that wasn't fair to her, or to the people who relate to her deeply. And truthfully, it wasn't even fair to me. Because once I sat with that comment, and I mean really sat with it, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I don't hate Shadowheart. I envy her. And that is a very different thing. And it was what led me to this essay today. Because I think it's important to talk about how religious trauma, internalized misogyny, and self-hate have led me to a place I thought I had grown past. And how I think I'm not alone in this. And that it might be time we all ask ourselves about the characters we hate on more than just a surface level.
Before I dive into this chapter, I want to say something clearly. I was raised Pentecostal.
Jump scare, it's my face. Editing Katera here. I just want to note that the gifts that I used for Pentecostals are incredibly accurate to how I grew up. I'm talking, we spoke in tongues, starting at the age of 8, singing, dancing, putting the laying of hands on people. Like one time, I didn't feel the Holy Spirit, and you're not supposed to like fall backwards if you don't feel the Holy Spirit. And my pastor full on pushed me backwards and then said that I was being oppressed by spirits and demons because I didn't feel the Holy Spirit. Like every crazy thing you see on TV of like Christians going above and beyond, singing, dancing, jumping a pew, I grew up with that. And those shows are accurate. Those movies are accurate.
Specifically in a fundamentalist version of Assemblies of God Christianity. That was my experience. I am not claiming all Christians are the same. If you are a person of faith who cannot separate your current beliefs from someone else's personal trauma, this may not be the essay for you. Because my story is not a personal attack on you. It is simply me sharing my personal truth. Shadowheart is a child of Shar, but not by choice. She was taken young, raised in secrecy, stripped of her name, her family, her choices. She's trained to be a tool of the goddess of darkness, of secrets, silence, and of self-erasure. And for a long time, Shadowheart believes that obedience is survival, that devotion is the only identity she can hold. And that part, that's where it hits me. Because I was raised Pentecostal. Not just culturally religious. I mean, full Bundy, cult adjacent, demons are real, and I supposedly can see them, speak in tongues at the age of 8 where something's wrong with you, kind of Pentecostal. I was told every thought I had was monitored by God, that my value was in obedience, that any rebellion, any doubt, that was a sin. If you've ever seen those paddles, that's what you get for voicing a single thought outside of what you were told to believe. Have you ever seen these race car tracks? Same thing. And wooden spoons? Yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. Imagine, if you will, a world in which you're told you have to prepare for the tribulation and how people will unalive you for worshiping God. So people that you trust place a pew-pew to your head and demand that you denounce God so that one day when other people place a pew-pew to your head, you're not going to be afraid and you can handle mid or post-trib. Imagine, if you will, a world in which, before getting baptized at 8, people stage a fake rapture, like how everyone vanished in Kirk Cameron's Left Behind. And you're freaking terrified because you think you didn't get baptized soon enough. And that's supposed to be an important lesson. Imagine, if you will, a world where if you forget to ask God into your heart for the 20th time today and you accidentally sinned without realizing it, well, then you die. And now you're going to hell. All because you forgot to say, "Dear Jesus, please come into my heart and forgive me for all of my sins." Like Shadowheart, I was taught to silence myself, taught that my body didn't belong to me, it belonged to a man, that my desires were dangerous, that if something bad happened to me, it was because I had invited it, because I was not faithful enough to my God, because I tempted someone, because I wasn't quiet enough. And yes, this includes that at 5 years old, I had to testify in open court against CSA. And for years afterwards, I was told by religious leaders, plural, that I was a seductress, that I ruined my family, and that now I was worthless, damaged goods that no one would ever want to marry. In fact, one youth pastor told me that no one will ever believe you twice and then prove themselves right. Shadowheart's story triggers me, not because it is unbelievable, but because it is incredibly believable. Her fear of defying Shar, her confusion over her own wants, the way that she flinches when you ask her what she believes about herself. That used to be me. Well, you know what? Fuck it. We're being raw and honest here. That used to be me is inaccurate. That is still me. I still carry those scars. I still carry those doubts. I still constantly worry about putting out each and every single episode on this channel because I'm afraid that I will say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing and everyone will be upset and disappointed and I will be just as worthless as I was before I left this situation I grew up in. And maybe that's why I can't see Shadowheart clearly. Because when you've spent your whole life clawing your way out of a belief system that makes you feel worthless, seeing a version of yourself still inside of that system, well, it doesn't feel empowering. It feels like you're drowning. So I did what any rational person would do. I made it a joke. I brushed her off. I gave her snarky nicknames and I said that she was annoying. But what I really meant was she makes me uncomfortable with myself because Shadowheart, she's the version of me that didn't escape. And facing her forces me to confront a part of myself that still doesn't believe I deserve to be free. Since we're being raw and honest here, let's get one thing out of the way. I was a pick-me girl as a high school teenager. Not in a funny, cheeky, saying I like swords and video games, manic pixie dream girl kind of way, not in the I'm just not like other girls kind of way. I mean a full-blown internalized misogyny, ditching my friends for male validation, apologizing for the way other women act to men, the kind of behavior that hurts other women and ultimately yourself kind of way. And the worst part is I was really good at it because, well, I'd been trained to be really good at it. That religious trauma I talked about, mix that with a cocktail of growing up around red pill alt-right men, men who see women as property and who preach dominance as divine intervention. That's the world I grew up in. At least until my stepdad married my mom and saved us and got us out. He was the first man that I ever saw challenge the culture instead of embodying it. And without him, I'd still be stuck there. My dad was the reason I felt safe running away from my religion at 18. And he's the only adult who stood by me when I was outed, not once, but twice in my adolescence as being bisexual. He isn't perfect, because no one is, but he's perfect to me. But I digress. When you grow up in a culture that tells you that your entire value is based on whether a man finds you as either pure, useful, or desirable, well, you learn very quickly the only way to survive is to cater for that male approval. I was praised when I wore modest clothes, when I said that I would wait for marriage because it would make me worthy again, and when I would call myself not like other girls, well, I was told that I was wise for putting those boys' feelings first, that I was godly for forgiving them when they didn't respect my boundaries, and that I was mature for letting things go and not causing a fuss, because I needed to make myself smaller, quieter, and that would make me easy to love. But none of that is love. Not really. It's oppression. It was a conditional acceptance, and it was tied to my performance, my silence, and my willingness to put myself beneath someone. And after running from my cult, that ideology didn't die overnight. I went from being praised for modesty to being praised for dressing like, pardon the term, I can't think of a better one, a sloot. I went from being not like other girls because I said that I would wait and that would make up for my CSA to being not like other girls because I would do anything a man wanted with my body, even if I really didn't want to. I put men's needs first, their life goals, their desires. I even picked the first college I went to and ultimately transferred out of based on a man. And I had to claw myself out of that mindset and all of those dark, horrible choices. I remember feeling proud that the boys chose me to confide in, and I never realized that they only did so because they knew I wasn't going to challenge them or their ideologies. They weren't confiding in me. I was just a sounding board. And I remember thinking that I had more value when I was liked by men, even if it meant that I was invisible to the women that I really wanted to be with. But let's be clear, learning to give zero fucks if men like me, that was fucking life-changing. It made me into who I am today. And without my best friend and her and I growing together into adulthood at my second college, I would still be lost and broken. She completes me in a way that no one else ever can. So, ladies out there, the women in your life should be your rock. Invest in your friend who also invests in you. Because at the end of the day, romantic relationships can fall apart. but true friendship is going to last forever. And that energy that hums between two women, it's more beautiful than energy between anyone else in the entire world. And it's worth treasuring because it'll change you for the better. People are always talking about how women make men's lives easier and that behind every great man is a woman propping him up. Well, baby girl, other women will make your life better too. And I wish that I could go back and teach the 15-year-old dumbass version of myself that. I wish that I could give her the tools that I have now so she could escape the heartbreak and suffering that ultimately taught me the lessons that I know now. And yes, that's the part where Shadowheart starts to reflect on me again, because Shadowheart has the same armor. The sharp tongue, the cold aloofness that looks like she's begging to be chosen, just not by a man. She wants to be chosen by Shar or her elders, by the people who raised her and believe that loyalty equals love. But that's where we are different. When I wasn't accepted by my cult, I turned to men because they were easy to get acceptance from. I just needed somebody to choose me, somebody to validate me, somebody to make me feel worthy. But Shadowheart, she didn't run away from her cult. She stayed on that path. And she held on to those teachings, those rituals, and that belief system that she wasn't good enough, wasn't obedient enough, wasn't devoted enough, and that if she tried harder, she'd maybe be loved. And in a way, she's not the version of who I was. She's the version of who I would be if I had stayed. But her actions aren't strength. They're fear. The fear of being vulnerable, of being rejected, of being seen and then discarded. And the only way I knew how to survive that fear myself was just to play the part. To be chill, to be cool, to be the girl who didn't cause drama, who let things slide, who competed with other women instead of standing beside them. And I hate admitting that because I have spent almost a decade doing everything I can to unlearn that. But the truth is, I still feel it. That little voice that whispers, you're only lovable to people if you're useful. And you're only safe if somebody chooses you. And you're only good if other people happen to like you. And when I look at Shadowheart, especially fucking Act 1 and 2 Shadowheart, I see the same voice in her eyes, which is probably why I want to mute her voice so badly.
I didn't get here. I just want to apologize for how my voice sounds, or sounded, in this last act. I cried writing it. I cried reading it. I'm crying editing it. My voice had no hope. Eventually, I realized that I needed to actually get to know Shadowheart, not as a meme, not through the lens of a romance arc that I was avoiding out of spite, but as a person. So I replayed her story, non-romantically. I let myself listen. I let myself care. I asked the questions. I gave her space. And for once, I wasn't watching her with Astarion beside me. I wasn't listening to her through the filter of wanting someone else. I wasn't distracted by the horny little bi girl inside of me that wanted to dive headfirst between her thighs and ignore the emotional work that it's going to take to see her clearly. I gave her a fair chance. And then after getting to know her, I ran her romance. Properly, genuinely, no jokes, no avoidance. And what I found, it wasn't hate. It wasn't even discomfort anymore. It was an admiration, respect, envy, recognition. Because there are things about Shadowheart that I wish that I could be. The way that she sets boundaries, even when it costs her connection. The way that she's able to date without physical intimacy until she feels emotionally secure. A thing that both I and Astarion wish we could do. The way she wrestles with doubt and doesn't let it swallow her. The way that she chooses herself. Not because it's easy to do it, but because it's necessary. There's a strength in her that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It simply endures. I realized I needed to refocus and unlearn some deeper set layers of internalized misogyny and that need to compete with women I would otherwise look up to. I realized that I can do better. And I should do better, that I want to be like her. And instead of fighting with her reflection in me, I should try and work through the traumas I still feel hindered by, which is how we got here. A comment that started this season's content on introspection and religious comparisons and gaming and pop culture, like you saw with last week's episode on Death Stranding. Not every episode this season will be on this topic, far from it, in fact. But enough to remind myself and to remind others that we all still have a lot of self-discovery to do, and that no matter how far we've come, we always have room to improve and keep learning. But that's not failure. That's just the beauty of life. We're ever changing and evolving, and the ability to change is what makes us human. And before you go, a girlie got to pay her bills. I mean, JK, I only make about enough a month in book sales for a cup of coffee, but I do love that devil's bean juice. So today I'm going to do a small reading from Infinity's Touch, which is the first book in my Gemstone Soul series, which is a dark, poly vampire romance. Troy leans casually against the doorway, as close as he can possibly get without crossing the threshold. Good morning, little one. I take a step back. Not so much that I look like I'm fleeing, but enough to breathe. Just because this 3 o'clock has an AM after it does not make it the morning. Well, good night to you then. He smirks, charm curled into every syllable. Though that sounds like a farewell, not a greeting. Maybe we should make it that way then. I cross my arms. And here I thought you wanted to invite me in. That devil's glint in his eye, that tone, laced with threat, with innuendo. Spoken like a true player, I scoff. Such a funny joke. Sarcasm is becoming of you. There's a subtle but sharp shift in his tone. The smile still curves his lip, but something behind his eyes flickers cold. I struck a nerve. Calling him a player, it didn't land the way I thought it would. That insulted him far more than I thought it would. I feel slightly steadier. I step forward again. He moves faster than I expect. One moment he's standing there, devil-mouthed and full of wicked charm, and the next, he's on me. I stepped too close. He still hasn't crossed it, not a single toe over the line. But I was stupid, and I stepped too close to the open door, stepped within arm's reach. His hand snaps up, curling into the back of my neck with shocking precision. His fingers are possessively firm, but I can't react. He yanks me toward him, claiming my mouth with his. Like it's not just a kiss. It's a sentence, a brand, a punishment. His lips crash against mine, soft but brutal at the same time, and I feel the command in it, his hunger, his worship. My breath catches in my throat, my knees wobble. I should slap him, scream, pull away. But I don't, because for one wicked second, I let myself kiss him back. And with that, thank you for being here today, because writing and gaming, they're my passions. And with subscribers like you, I get to explore those passions, even when they're raw and vulnerable and make me cry like today's episode. But I hope to see you again in the next one. And good night, darling.